Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. We're not back in the pub yet, we're still in self-isolation, but we are here to answer your questions. I'm joined as ever by Chris Hamill and Patrick Van Straten, and today's talking point is a bit of a different one. It's Newcastle United. That was suggested by Toon Magpie on Twitter. He just wants to know our thoughts on the takeover. Now, this is a takeover that's been a long time coming. I think we can all agree. It was first rumoured to be happening in 2017 when Amanda Staveley had that bid rejected, with Mike Ashley calling it a complete waste of time, but she is back. And this time she's got some big backing in the form of Saudi Arabian firm PIF, which, if you go all the way back, finds its roots at Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who is, of course, focusing on improving Saudi's image as a country. You know, this whole project of Vision 2030 has been putting on the fights between Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz. She's also got backing in the same group by the Reuben brothers, who originally found their money mining in Afghanistan and are now a property investment company in the UK. The way it's split is basically she's on 10%, the Reuben brothers 10%, and the Saudis 80% of a rumoured £350 million takeover. It was first reported by the Wall Street Journal in January. The Telegraph confirmed last week that papers had been submitted to the Premier League. Usually takes around 4 to 8 weeks for the Premier League to do all of their owners' tests. And the Athletic have also today confirmed that this is not Mike Ashley PR trying to improve his image around the coronavirus. So it seems like it could have been happening. And it is a long time coming, because Newcastle fans will be delighted to see the back of Mike Ashley, Hamill.
Yeah, it's been a pretty tempestuous relationship, hasn't it, between Mike Ashley and the Newcastle fans in the last 13 years. Started out okay. And then it's all gone downhill pretty much, apart from some little ups maybe, particularly under Rafa Benitez. I'm not sure how glad they'll be, or whether the reaction will be overwhelmingly positive, given that the buyers are unknown entities. Kind of getting out of bed with Mike Ashley and then straight into it with a consortium that involves Saudi Arabia might raise a few eyebrows, and rightly so. But it's become clear that this thing, Mike Ashley and Newcastle, is broken beyond repair now. So something needs to happen in order for the club to move forward, and it feels like, yeah, they might as well sell to whoever. I imagine this isn't the set of circumstances that Ashley would want to sell in. Of course, it's been reported that his personal fortune has taken an £800 million hit due to the coronavirus. I'm sure he's kind of more between a rock and a hard place than he wanted to be selling the club. But yeah, probably a positive reaction in general, but not, I don't know, not what fans would have wanted ideally, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think they're just going to be delighted to see the back of him effectively at this time. There's been so many promises of the club being sold, isn't there? I think this is the third time he's put them up for sale. The other 2 times he's pulled them off the market. There's been so much bad blood between Mike Ashley and this set of fans, all the way, you can trace it all the way back to when he first took over. But I mean, I think probably, in my mind anyway, as a neutral, the whole St James's Park fiasco, naming it Sports Direct, you know, the club shop becoming the Sports Direct of that area effectively, all of the advertising boardings, I think there's 130 advertising boardings around the pitch that have the Sports Direct banners on them, and I don't think he's paid much for those advertising banners. Obviously not taking that in. You've got the Wonga loan company, of course, that immediately springs to mind as well. There's so many issues, let alone lack of investment in the squad, lack of investment in the stadium, lack of investment in the training ground, that I think from Newcastle fans' perspective, it is just good news to see the back of him, and whoever comes in can only be an improvement.
Yeah, I mean, he's not run the club into the ground financially. He's not broken any laws. And it's really weird, isn't it? Because he is an extremely astute businessman. Like, people revel in his retail ability. And he's turned around several stuttering brands and used them to lowball, his competition on the high street and effectively murdered them. In that Athletic article, it mentions JJB, it mentions All Sports. He's worked his way to the very top, and it just seems so odd that he's not been able to replicate any of that success with Newcastle. I mean, in the same article, it touches upon how little time he actually gets to dedicate to the club. They call him an absentee landlord in it. I mean, the latest profits show an £18.2 million net profit, so he's leaving the club in okay financial order as well. But he's used it very much, it would seem, as just an asset, and his cold, hard business acumen has not really been welcome in Newcastle, where the football club is the epicentre of the community. It's like he just doesn't know how to foster a sense of community. All the human side of football has evaded him, while he continues to be good with the numbers, I suppose. I mean, his legacy will read poorly, won't it? No top 4 finishes, 1 season in Europe, no domestic cup finals or semi-finals, only 2 quarter-finals. I think Lincoln City have a quarter-final under the belt in the same period, and they're in League One. Average Premier League finish of 13th. 2 relegations in the last 13 years, none in the previous 13 years before that. But then, he froze season ticket prices for 10 years. There was the odd sentimental thing, but overall, it's just completely devoid of emotion, the whole relationship, and that's just, essentially cost him. I don't think he's earned a penny, despite the fact he's often positioned as this man that's milked the club. I don't think he's walking out having earned anything. So it's just been disastrous for all parties, hasn't it?
What do you make of it all, Pat?
I think that it's basically an easy situation for new owners to come into. I think there are so many easy PR wins straight up. You can continue to freeze ticket prices just by renaming the stadium, or rather returning it to its old name. Things like that are just going to instantly make you popular there. And to be honest with you, I think most football fans actually don't care who owns their club, so long as there's loads of investment going into the squad. The issue that they have is obviously you can't just pump money in the way you could 10 years ago. Now teams are worrying about financial fair play in a way they weren't before, and so they're going to need to increase revenue in order to do that. But actually, my issue there is whether they can do it intelligently. Because when you look at Mike Ashley's ownership, I think some of the bits of information you kind of reeled off there, Hamill, I don't think that they're particularly fair. I'm no defender of Mike Ashley, but I mean, in the 12 years before he arrived, they did have Alan Shearer at the peak of his abilities, and that was why they managed to get into the top 4 a couple of times. Their relegations, I mean, one of the times they got relegated was in 2015-16, when they spent £100 million in the transfer market, and they brought in Wijnaldum, they brought in Mitrovic, they brought in Thauvin. Right, so to me, the issue isn't so much about how much they spend, but whether they can spend intelligently. I think if Newcastle fans are expecting that this is going to push them into the kind of top echelon of Premier League clubs, I think that that's unrealistic, and I think that actually now football is kind of set up to prevent that happening. And as for changing Mike Ashley for the Reuben brothers and Mohammed bin Salman, I think that actually I think that's actually swapping somebody who is quite a bad person for people who are even worse. Mohammed bin Salman is as bad a person as you could possibly get owning a football club right now. But fans won't care, because they just care about money going into the team, and they care about results on the pitch, and they care about whether it has the feel of their club. And it will have the feel of their club, probably, because all the Sports Direct crap will be chucked out on the street.
Yeah, just to go back to your point on recruitment though, Pat, I think it is worth saying that I know that that one summer, I think could potentially be a bit of an example of where they recruited actually all right. Some of those players have gone on to be strong, but their overall recruitment needs a massive overhaul, and that's never going to happen under Mike Ashley. He's never going to dip his hand in his pocket and decide, I'm going to overhaul the recruitment department. There was refusal to invest in the training facilities. I don't think you're ever going to... In fact, I think there was an anecdote in one of the Athletic articles that talked about how Mike Ashley had a 72-year-old chief scout called Graham Carr who didn't know how to use a computer. And he was getting reports from analytics departments and on his computer, and he couldn't open up his email. You know, he's obviously left the club subsequently, but I think that kind of... If Mike Ashley even has a remnants of that level of incompetence at recruitment level, it's always going to fall apart.
Like, he scouted Johan Kabay and Sissoko as well, so he was a good scout. I think that was more of an example of how they were paying for all this data, and then it was effectively being funneled into a guy who couldn't interpret it.
Use it.
Yeah, so that is a really good example of just a lack of joined up thinking at the club. Good and bad things did happen, and I struggle to give a man too much leeway, you know, who gave Alan Pardew a 7-year contract, or hired Joe Kinnair twice, didn't he? Once in a management capacity, once in a sporting director capacity. These were decisions made by a really smart businessman, but apparently not smart enough to seek out the wisdom of the previous owners, like Hall. He said he was never asked, never sought an advisory capacity once by Mike Ashley. I think Mike Ashley probably just thought it'd be a bit of a laugh and just never had time to make it work. And then in the end, if Rafa Benitez can't fix that club, a man with that pedigree, with that silverware, with a history of delivering, you know, going above and beyond with clubs like Valencia, then yeah, it is probably broken beyond repair, isn't it? I mean,
well, I think Rafa had a sit-down meeting with Mike Ashley in 2017, and he kind of explained his vision for the club and how much it was going to cost to take him to a position that he thought he could get in, which was around the 8th spot. And I think it's kind of promised to him by Mike Ashley he would have £70 million to spend across the course of the next 2 seasons, and that never really bared fruit. The players, in particular, one standout, Willy Caballero, who Rafa really wanted at the club, and he obviously didn't join and end up going to Chelsea, stand out. And then after that, there was no investment in the training ground, and there was promises that were broken. And I think overall, it's just so bitter there. I mean, the Joe Linton story is incredible. The fact that Mike Ashley personally scouted Joe Linton and wanted Joe Linton, and Rafa Benitez wanted no part of the transfer, and Mike Ashley wanted him so bad he put up £20 million of his own cash to fund the deal alongside the club.
Yeah, but how bizarre is that?
It's kind of silly that he's interfering with that. I completely agree. You need to have like a proper director of football doing that, who is not Joe Kinnear and knows what they're doing. But actually, some of their transfers in the last couple of years have been pretty smart. They just haven't really fitted together the right way, or they've been hamstrung a little bit by the fact that they were like, right, we've lost Rafa Benitez, let's just bring in Steve Bruce. And Steve Bruce is a perfectly decent manager, but it's weird to make progressive signings like Saint-Maximin, Joe Linton, even Danny Rose on loan, even Miguel Almiron as well, and then entrust them to a guy who is going to play quite an old-fashioned style of football. Like that to me is the issue. Like, if you're gonna play kind of Bruce ball, then recruit players for Steve Bruce. If you want to turn into something else, then you can't just buy the players, and you can't just say, oh well, I like this player, so we're going to get him. You've got to get a manager who believes in that as well, and that is always the issue, isn't it? Like with Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley wants more power than he should reasonably have, and the people he actually hires, who probably should have a little bit more power, aren't actually good enough to do the job a lot of the time. So it feels like, yes, Mike Ashley shouldn't be sticking his oar in, but on the other hand, I don't really trust people he's hired throughout the process to run things on their own either. So I think if you were coming in now, there are just really simple ways that you can improve this stuff. Like, get in a director of football who is going to determine a playing style and is going to have an idea of the budget and recruit accordingly, and get them to help you find the right coach who can come in and give you a level up. Because there was a point in Mike Ashley's time when they were trying to get Thomas Tuchel, and if that had happened, we might honestly be looking at them very, very differently. Like, I think Newcastle, my worry is that Newcastle fans are going to start thinking, this is us going up to kind of 6th place in the league, we're going to be pushing, and they're going to need to recruit very intelligently over several... They're basically going to have to do what Leicester's done. And even Leicester are probably going to fall away at some point because you lose your players. Newcastle have a slightly better fan base, you know, like a bigger fan base and a bigger stadium, which should help them generate more revenue faster. But I don't know, there are so many steps between Newcastle now and Newcastle actually being a kind of big club again, that I'm not sure I have that much faith in all those steps being taken in the right order.
Well, I think with the amount of money that's being invested, they're going to have to invest super smart. I think immediately they're going to have to sort out the stadium and the training ground before they look at the recruitment potentially. And then, like you said, the recruitment has to align with the manager. And I'm not too sure whether Steve Bruce is the manager that will see this transition over.
No.
I think he'll probably be the guy who, when it's happening, is there for the rest of the season, maybe next season. But they are going to have to look slightly more progressive, in my opinion, if they want to hit the heights that have been talked about by Amanda Staveley in the past.
This feels a little bit like when Mark Hughes was in charge at Manchester City during that sort of period, right, where the takeover was first actioned. And I know he only lasted, what, 7, 8 games, but it's like he has a similar profile to Bruce in that regard. If an owner comes in who is cash rich, they will want a manager who sort of symbolises, who's emblematic of their ambition, and to leave Steve Bruce in there would probably be, results aside, even though they are bottom of the league on expected points, so perfectly justified moving him along, would probably be a bit of a PR disaster. I think they need to start healing the wounds in the community before they focus on being anything more than a top 8 club. If Rafa Benitez says with 70 mil they can be a top 8 club, then kind of who are we to disagree with that? I think challenging Wolves is probably a fair goal at the moment, but they had to give away like 10,000 half season tickets in the last couple of years, and that is just something that is a huge alarm bell, because Newcastle fans have been loyal through and through to their club. They love their club with a passion that, you know, not many other fan bases in the UK do, and for them to feel so disenfranchised, that's got to be ground zero for me. Just reaching out into the community and building bridges. Similar, Man City redeveloped certain areas around the stadium, didn't they? They built a stand at the training ground, and people were in the community were free to come and watch. I think they'll probably have to do some stuff like that, win some heart and minds first and foremost, to be honest.
But I think that is quite easily done in Newcastle with the amount of rubbish that's happened over the past 12 years. I think it's actually fairly easily done. Like Pato said at the start, just go back, rename St James's Park, have a face in the community. Probably that's going to be one of the Reuben brothers, I would imagine. I think it's Jamie Reuben that is currently on the board at QPR and has kind of been one of the faces of the directors boards at QPR and involved in the building of the local area around the club. And he'll have to leave his position, I would presume, on the board of QPR to take up a position on the board at Newcastle. And if it's going to be him that is out there and in the face of it, you know, they've got to be on the radio stations, they've got to be trying to do as much PR as possible before you start signing big name players. Because I've seen Newcastle fans on Twitter going, oh, we're going to sign Mbappe. I mean, like, it'll be sort of mad rumours over the last, like, 2 weeks.
Like, I think the most damning thing is, right, when Newcastle were the first club in the UK to announce that they were going to go onto the government's furlough scheme, no one was surprised. I don't think anyone was disappointed. There was not any uproar because everyone fully expected Newcastle to do that and Mike Ashley to do that. Because, like you said, because of the whole Wonga thing, the whole Gutierrez debacle. Like, they have such a low standing. Like, their reputation has just been dragged through the mud. That, yeah, going back to what the pair of you said, there's so many easy wins at the start that if they aren't actioned straight away, then that's just stupid. But
so let's say that this takeover does get completed. How do we think Newcastle should progress forward? Is there a club they should be modelling themselves on? They should just be going out and spending Robinho money like Manchester City did? What would you do if you were bought in to Newcastle United, Pat?
I'd 100% run myself like Leicester. Like that is what I do. Pre-Rodgers Leicester. But yeah, I think that's shouldn't be too difficult to do. I think that I'd probably look in the Netherlands or Germany, try and find a director of football who had a track record of recruiting kind of younger, progressive pressing coaches. I would target players mostly in the probably 10 to 25 million pound range, pretty much 24 and under, because then at least you can get money back. And I think that would just be an easy way to move things forward. Like, I actually think that in Joe Linton and Saint-Maximin, that's a really good couple of players to have. And Almiron's pretty useful as well. The defense is in pretty decent shape. I mean, I say that, like, given the talent in it, the defense is in pretty decent shape. I think if you upgrade that talent, then you can start to really push on. So yeah, I would be probably looking at the lower half of Ligue 1. I'd be looking at the Eredivisie, Ligue 2, the Bundesliga to some extent. That's where I'd be shopping for players. And actually, as much as people say Premier League money makes teams like double their prices, there are still bargains to be had, as has been shown by Saint-Maximin, I would say.
Yeah, I think I would just go to Ralph Rangnick's door and just go, how much to get you in here as the director of football to rebuild this brand? Because there's still talk, isn't there, about him going to AC Milan?
Why does he go to Newcastle though? Why does he go to Newcastle? Like,
why does he go to Milan? Why does he go to Milan?
No, I don't. Well, except if he wants to be manager and wants to rebuild like a truly big club. You could argue that, like, you know, you go to Milan and you turn Milan back into contenders somehow. Like, that's pretty amazing. Whereas even if he does an amazing job at Newcastle are not going to be contenders.
Never say never under Big Ralph.
I say never.
Yeah, you're probably right. But I think if he doesn't go to Milan, he's the ideal man who can come in and rebuild the whole sporting side of Newcastle.
Sure. Or what's your boy... what's the English guy who also works for Red Bull, who was linked with Man United as their sporting director?
It's Paul Mitchell.
Yeah, that guy. Like, go and chuck so much money at him and a helicopter so that he doesn't have to live in Newcastle.
So I've been doing a bit of reading in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Rangnick and Mitchell have both accepted new positions at the Red Bull organisation. I actually think, I mean, if just sell the club to Red Bull. I mean, they might suck the soul out of the club, but they'll run it efficiently. They'll run it well.
The Red Bull Arena.
Yeah, and probably a better destination than the Saudis. I think I'll probably go for a safer pair of hands that can help kind of maybe replicate what Benitez did, who's maybe going to be there for 2 or 3 years, keep them in the division, keep them competitive, and who's going to match the current playing personnel a little bit better than obviously someone like Rangnick, who likes to play aggressive, vertical, pressing football. I can't really see... Well, maybe the front three can, but yeah. Maybe Bordalas at Getafe, if he can stabilise them for a couple of years, shore up that defence, squeeze every modicum of talent out of that playing personnel in the same manner that Benitez did.
What about just bringing back Benitez? I think it would be a big PR success on Newcastle. I think, like, all the fans love him. He would probably come back. I don't think he had an acrimonious split with Newcastle as much as he had an acrimonious split with Mike Ashley. And he'd be a high caliber manager for them. Yeah,
or Marcelino. He's actually a pretty similar style. You can imagine him building on that back four that's been put together by Bruce and Benitez. And I think that's not too difficult to do. Like, just to find the right sort of coach. Like, they are available. Southampton managed to get Hasenhüttl. Like, you can do it. And then it's just about sensible, smart recruitment, because they're going to stay up this season, it looks like. It would be kind of a spectacular collapse for them not to. I actually don't think this is that hard a job to turn them around, but it depends what your goal is. If you're talking about Champions League, you're insane. If you're talking about Europa League, you've got a shot. But fundamentally, I think a good result for Newcastle is that over the next 10 years, they're at the lower half of the top half of the table, if that makes sense. You know, like
Yeah.
kind of sixth to 10th would be amazing. I think 10th is probably about right.
All right, there we have it. That's enough Newcastle chat for today. I think let's move on to some quick fire questions. This one was sent in by Los Blancosita. How does Eden Hazard turn it around at Madrid? Does he need to leave? Now, obviously, this comes off the back of those quotes about him eating a lot in self-isolation. He likes his buns. But he's not had a good season there, has he? He's had a lot of injuries.
I've not heard anything about this eating thing. What's happened? I saw he did it on Snapchat.
Yeah, effectively, he's come out. He said that he's having a hard time sticking to the diet. In a nutshell.
Okay. Sure.
But it was something that happened when he, of course, first arrived at Madrid, didn't he? I think he arrived 5 kg overweight, and then he had to lose that. Then he picked up his injury. Now he's struggling again. So I suppose Los Blancosita wants to know, do you think it's better he leaves or just ploughs on? Obviously ploughs on, in my opinion.
Unless Real Madrid can use him as a make weight for another player, then you're talking. But his wages are going to be obscene, so there's a very small number of people they can do that with. The obvious place is obviously PSG, right? You send him to PSG in part exchange for Mbappe if PSG will accept that. And given that Mbappe has, I think, 2 years left on his contract this summer, like maybe they're interested, but I don't know. He's another year older. This year's been basically a wash. Like it was one of the things that we said when they signed him, which is if you're going to sign this guy at 28 years old, you're basically saying he's got to arrive. We get like 3 or 4 good, probably 3 good years out of him. And that's where the value is. Now that one of those years has basically disappeared, then suddenly it looks like a much worse transfer, especially with Vinicius and Rodrigo coming through. And Vinicius has been starting quite a bit recently, especially in important games. If I could shift him, I would shift him. If it lets me go and get another superstar forward. But I think this is just one of those signings where you're kind of stuck. You're paying him so much money. You paid so much for him. Unless you're willing to take a significant loss or you can broker a very clever deal, I'm not sure that they'll be able to get rid of him.
I would just hold out and wait to see if he can hit that sort of form that he achieved at Chelsea next year. I think, for me, it'd be jumping the gun. Getting rid of him now, especially in the absence of a star forward. I mean, Benzema's been playing well, right, the last couple of years, but still can't really get over the 20-25 goal barrier. So, yeah, I would keep him.
Yeah, I think I would keep him as well. The next one was sent in by Jed Walkington. What do you make of Arsenal's interest in Thomas Partey? Do they actually need him? Question mark. Obviously, this is another one this week. I think it was rumoured in the region of £43 million, Pato. Thomas Partey, obviously a phenomenal player. Do you need him, though? Would you not just keep Dani Ceballos? Another 2 different players, but another central midfielder?
Well, Dani Ceballos, to make him permanent, I wouldn't be surprised if the asking price was not that much less than Partey. He's younger, but Partey's the much better player. I think this would be a great move if you can convince him, and it sounds like he is convincible for some reason. He's for that money, I think that's a spectacular buy. In fact, if Arsenal got close to getting that deal done, I'd be shocked if somebody else didn't say, why aren't we just paying this money and like gazump them for him? But maybe they can get lucky and pull him in the way that Spurs got Ndombele and Lo Celso. It would be great. It would pretty much solve their Granit Xhaka problem because Partey is going to do a lot more defending, but he's also an excellent dribbler. And this season, he's been a really important passer into the final third for Atleti. He's been extremely good at getting there. I think he leads the squad in passes into the final third. So he's going to give you most of the passing, much more dribbling and much more defensive work. And I think that means you can free up your forwards, which actually could mean that even if you lost Aubameyang, you maybe get a bit more out of the others because they're not having to track back quite so much. Yeah,
I think Thomas Partey would be an incredible sign at 43. My worry would be is that 43 eats into such a sizable portion of the budget that then you lose out on a centre-back target like Upamecano to a rival. And I think the centre-back should be prioritised over a central midfielder this season for Arsenal. But he would be an incredible signing. This one for you then, Hamill, Tim Green. Don't want to throw you under the bus too much, but if you were Kai Havertz this summer, where would you go? That's from Tim Green, obviously linked to Bayern.
I was going to say, it feels like there's only one destination for him, and that's Bayern, right? Although Thomas Muller has been a brilliant kind of second forward. He's created an awful lot, hasn't he? Recently had a very productive relationship with Lewandowski in the last 18 months or so. Kai Havertz. He's become much more of a second forward this season, right, than a particularly outstanding creator, if my memory of his numbers serves me correctly. I think he's probably all right where he is under Peter Bosz, isn't he? For another 6 months, a year before Bayern inevitably negotiate his fee down and he heads to Bavaria. It'd be wicked if like, a Leipzig or a Dortmund got him instead of Bayern, just to keep the Bundesliga ultra competitive. Maybe one of those clubs.
I think I actually think that if David Silva obviously does move on, I actually think he'd be a fun option at Man City, especially if they lost Leroy Sané to Germany as well.
Wouldn't Phil Foden be absolutely fuming though?
I think, yeah, but Phil Foden's been putting up with competition for the last 3 years of his life. I think he's going to have to put up with competition for his whole Manchester City career. It's a hotly contested attacking midfield role, isn't it? And the loss of David Silva is going to have to be covered with a signing. I don't believe that Pep will 100% say, I'm just going to entrust Phil Foden with this and not bring in another player. And I think Kai Havertz would be a fun little sort of 8 to 10 for them. Because obviously when he was playing initially, was it alongside Julian Brandt, where they're playing as both like attacking split 8s, which was quite interesting. I think he could do a good job for Man City, but yeah, he's inevitably going to go to Bayern. Right, should we do one last question then, personal? This one from Grace. She says, best TV show you've watched whilst you've been in self-isolation?
Hardest question today, to be honest.
Ooh, I don't know whether you guys watched The Nest on ITV.
No.
That was a very good show.
Go on, tell us about it.
So basically, it's a Scottish drama.
Oh, it's got Martin Compton.
Martin Compton in, yeah. And it's about how he and his wife are trying to find a surrogate for a surrogate mother, and find a surrogate mother, and the drama that kind of keeps happening around this mother to be. It's really good. Martin Compton's excellent in it. I'd recommend watching it. The Nest. And obviously Tiger King, but obviously Tiger King, everybody's watched Tiger King.
The latest thing I've watched is Handmaid's Tale. Don't know if either of you boys have watched that. It is fucking bleak.
No, I don't want to watch bleak stuff though.
Oh, I know. It's a tough watch in a time like this. Elizabeth Moss is excellent in it though. And it's really well done. It's not necessarily the most fun thing I've watched, but we did watch 4 episodes on the bounce, which is normally the earmark of a good show, right?
See, we've still got The Handmaid's Tale, like whatever season we got up to, like 2 or 3 or something, like I don't know, whenever we gave up.
Oh no, does it drop off?
Well, I don't know, it was one of those things where sometimes, you know, like you just stop watching it and then like months pass. But on the topic of Elizabeth Moss, like we just finished Mad Men, and it's good. There's loads of stuff I really like about it. I do think Don Draper is one of the worst characters in TV history.
What?
But it's a good show.
That's such a controversial opinion.
Elaborate on the Don Draper.
Can't just drop that and not explain it.
He literally has no personality. Like there are other people in the show who have like characteristics, and there are things they want, and you can kind of understand them. Whereas Don Draper, I feel like, is one of those characters that American writers love to create, where he's just kind of like cool, but he actually doesn't have. At no point is what he wants clear. At no point do you really understand the character. They never really dig beneath the surface with him. Like every now and then he'll like cry in an episode. That's not the same as getting beneath the surface with him. And I think compared to like Peggy in that show, or compared to Joan, he doesn't have any depth to him. And Roger doesn't really have any depth, but Roger's super fun. Don's not fun, and he's not interesting, and he also doesn't really have any depth, and that just frustrates me because I think the characters around him, most of them are amazing, and he himself is just dull.
His morbidity is captivating. He's supposed to be a little bit dead inside, isn't he?
But they don't do anything with that. Like, I mean, they don't make anything of that. That's not explored. It's just kind of dull. Like I feel like they do things with that character. They just make decisions based on what they think kind of looks cool. And I don't know. I don't really get along with it. I find that Don Draper is kind of the hole at the center of that show, and John Hamm's doing his best with like quite poor material for that character.
Jeez. Okay, that is a controversial opinion to end on. But anyway, that is this week's episode of Sunday Isolation Vibes. My recording died as you were doing that, Pato, so it is good, but I ran out of space. So I'm now filming my phone, so if it does look a little bit different, apologies. But yeah, anything to plug? What was on the podcast this week?
I talked with Doogie about some transfers that have been heavily rumoured. We talked a bit about how Dortmund might replace Jadon Sancho. We talked about the Tanguy Ndombele to Barcelona rumours, and a little bit about Real Madrid in there as well, because Real Madrid have been linked with some mad moves in the market.
Anything for you, Hamill?
No, I'm all good, mate. Lovely to see you boys.
Okay, there we have it. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later.
Bye.